Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today we're talking about the third studio album from Brockhampton, Saturation 3. Alright folks, I've been greatly anticipating this album ever since Brockhampton dropped Saturation 2 back in August. Now, the first two albums in this trilogy of albums are two of my favorite albums of the year currently. I got into Brockhampton when they dropped the first Saturation album, and the second album rivaled the first album in my opinion. Like I said in my review for the second album, which by the way, the reviews for all my Brockhampton related content are linked in the description down below. There's a playlist with all of it in there, so make sure you check that out. But like I said in that review, I wasn't sure which album I really liked more, and I'm still not 100% sure, to be honest. And now with this third album, I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen because, well, while they did give us two great albums already this year, most artists usually don't release three good albums in a year, or even like two good albums in a year. So I was kind of concerned that this album wasn't going to live up to the first two albums in the trilogy. Well, it does live up to the first two albums. In fact, it gives those two albums a run for their money, to be honest, because this album, once again, comparing all three Saturation albums, I'm not sure which one's my favorite or my least favorite currently. I'm going to have to do my year-end list soon. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out when I do that. In that video, I guess you'll find out which of these three albums I like the most and, everything like that. But after that shameless self-promotion, let's get back to Saturation 3, which is a great album. I'm just going to put it as clearly as possible. I after several listens of this thing, it is something, to be honest. I don't think I've ever heard an artist before release three albums of this quality in such a short amount of time. I've heard double albums before that are great, or two albums in a year that are great, but three, I don't think I've quite heard before. So, props to Brockhampton for that. And this album, I kind of expected it to move in a bit of a darker or more depressing feel, just given the cover art, the ones that they released for all the band members, it's them all, sad and with the tear that's kind of become a meme at this point, but that's kind of what I expected, and that's kind of what you get here. To be honest, Saturation 3 is a lot more distinct sounding from its predecessors than, Saturation 2 was compared to Saturation 1, which is something I enjoy because, while Saturation 2 still was a great album, it did have many moments I think were, the songs could work on either Saturation or Saturation 2. Saturation 3, this feels kind of like its own thing compared to the first two albums. Not that it doesn't still tie into the first two well, but it definitely feels very much its own at the same time. And there are some of those darker moments that I anticipated, but there's also some songs that completely break from that expectation and move into a completely different territory. For example, the first single we got from this thing, Boogie, which was only dropped a couple days before the album was released. And I remember the first time I heard this song, it was just the audio, the video hadn't been released yet, and I hit play, and I was just in pure disbelief, almost staring at my computer screen. And once again, the video wasn't playing. There was nothing going on my computer screen really. I was just in that much shock just with what the song was doing, because it is such a random left field decision for Brockhampton, even though they're Brockhampton, and that's pretty much everything that they do. And I wasn't sure, do I love this song? Am I just kind of indifferent to it? I couldn't really tell, honestly, on my first listen, but with repeated listens, this is one of my favorite Brockhampton songs ever, and it's a great album opener. The beat on this thing is just something else, I tell you. It mixes sort of this electronic music sounding bass part with, saxophones, I guess, and it sounds like it shouldn't work, under no circumstances, but it works really well. And combine that with the fact that really all the members of the band that do vocals, with the exception of Bareface, are doing their thing here on this track, just providing some very memorable lines and things of that sort. I mean, that's just Brockhampton in general, but so many quotable parts here on this track. Especially, I love Joba's part where he's talking about being the chiropractor and breaking necks again, kind of a callback to Heat from the first Saturation album where he talks about breaking your neck. I thought that was really clever, and he kind of brings back the very shouty vocals that he also had on that track. It's probably my favorite part of the entire song, and it's great. And the members, they just flow so well from each other. I wasn't really sure how I felt at first of the fact that none of the members really had really long verses or anything. They're all relatively short, at times even a bit repetitive with what they're saying. But the way that they just flow from one person to another is just unbelievable, and especially over this really crazy sounding beat that just carries them perfectly. It all works so well in the context of the track as a whole that it's arguably one of the most memorable cuts here on the album. And that's really saying something, given some of the cuts that we get here on the project. Another track that definitely has a bit more of a darker and more aggressive edge is the track Sister, and kind of not really its counterpart Nation, which is really the second part of the track. The Sister just has this very dark, almost industrial sounding beat to it, and it's very interesting to say the least. And then Nation kind of being a break from that, the track just kind of switches up halfway through and goes to this more typical, I guess, sounding Brockhampton track, which I still do enjoy. I really like how the track switches up. It definitely adds an extra layer of personality to the song. But even just if you take the two halves, Sister or Nation, on their own, they're both very interesting, which I think is a cool thing. You have tracks like Bleach, which features, I forgot his name, but I guess one of their friends or associates doing the hook of that track, which I found really, enjoyable. All the members kind of providing their own very depressive, more introspective sounding verses here on this track. Kind of reminds me of Milk from Saturation 1 in that regard. It's just a very more heartfelt type track, and much of it was featured in the short film Billy Star that was released by Brockhampton a couple days before the album was released. If you saw that film, it's right at the beginning, and it plays most of the song except for everything that comes after Joba's part in the track. So it's a good amount of the song you get in Billy Star, but here's the full version on the album, and it's really just a great song, probably one of my favorites on the album as a whole. And you also have some tracks on here that have just a bit of a darker feel to them, like a Zipper, which the beat of this track kind of has a dark feel, but not like in a sort of evil or depressing sort of way. It's more like cartoony and kind of crazy all over the place, something like that. And I just love this beat on this track, honestly, and the way that the members are flowing over it just works so well. I have to say that as a whole, Saturation 3's production is the best out of any of the ones in the Saturation trilogy. And while I'm not exactly sure which the Saturation albums as a whole is my favorite, I could definitely say in terms of production, Saturation 3 is my favorite, just because there's such a diverse array of production that we get here. You have tracks like Boogie that are just something completely else, or you have more aggressive tracks like Sister, and you have tracks like Hottie, for example, that have more of a light, airy feel to them that I think works very well for the track. Tracks like Zipper, which, like I said, have sort of this very exaggerated, cartoony, evil feel to them. It's just a very diverse array of sounds, but kind of in typical Brockhampton fashion, the band manages to take from a wide array of sounds and make them into a cohesive, total product, which I think is Brockhampton's strongest aspect as a group. And I'm really happy that they, once again, are able to bring that aspect back here on Saturation 3. Certainly, I can't go through an entire review of this project without mentioning the hooks on these tracks, which are just astounding, super catchy, like all of Brockhampton's stuff just gets stuck in your head. And quite honestly, at this point, I'm almost certain there's an entire region of my brain just dedicated to Brockhampton hooks and one-liners and memorable quotes, because there's so many on this album, and just in their discography in general, to be completely honest. But once again, you have lots of great hooks here on this project, most of them provided by Kevin Abstract, who provides his typical, if you've heard the first two Saturation albums, you kind of know what you're getting into, but the hooks just, go very well with the tracks. For example, on Hottie, how it has this lunch, kind of going back to what I said before in its production, how it was very, airy and light sounding. He provides this very happy, sort of upbeat sounding hook that goes very nicely with the production. Or you have tracks, for example, like Zipper, which just has this crazy, sort of bouncy feel that goes very nicely with the production as well. You have tracks like Johnny that, once again, has a really catchy chorus to it. And to go back to Bleach, which also has a great chorus, though that's not done by any of the band members. It's done by, once again, I forgot whoever was featured on the track. But they do a great job with their feature that I think just ends up panning out very well for the track. It's not a feature that overpowers the track or anything, but it definitely it adds to the track, which is really all it needs to do. And then you have tracks like Team that close out this project, and in typical Brockhampton fashion, the track starts off kind of being a barefaced solo song, kind of like Waste and Summer were, but halfway through it completely breaks from that mold, and it kind of goes to this rap part where all the different members are kind of doing their own little thing. And on Twitter, I remember Kevin said that it has some sort of greater significance to it, the end of this track, And I think it might have to do with the upcoming studio album from Brockhampton, Team Effort. Just given the fact that it's called Team Effort and this track is called Team, it's kind of obvious that there's going to be some sort of greater connection to that. What exactly that connection is, I'm not sure as of right now, just because, haven't heard Team Effort yet. I'm not even sure it exists yet, to be honest. But I'm sure in time we'll know what the greater significance of it is. And it's just definitely a very interesting sound. Now, I think Team Effort might play into the story of the Saturation trilogy, and before you say, of course it's not going to play into the Saturation story because it's not a Saturation album, you got to remember that, I was thinking to myself, Kevin Abstract's album American Boyfriend does play into the Saturation storyline, as you can see in Billy Starr, as well as, the Helmet Boy kind of storyline that's going on and stuff, how that all ties in to the album, as well as the one Roberto skit that we have on this album where he mentions Summer, who's a character from Billy Starr and the Helmet Boy series and American Boyfriend. So there's definitely a connection between those. So maybe Team Effort kind of ties in as well, and we just don't know how it's going to work yet. That would be really cool in my opinion, but I don't know, that's maybe just a theory I have as of right now. And in the very end of Team, it starts playing the sound that you hear at the beginning of Heat, the first song on the first Saturation album, kind of making the albums like this loop, which I think is really cool. I'm not exactly sure what greater significance that has in terms of the albums as a whole, because we haven't gotten the Saturation movie yet or anything, so I'm not exactly sure if I can analyze the story as a whole as of now, because I'll probably get it wrong. But that's definitely a cool aspect, and it's unique, I guess you could say. The bareface part of this closing track is actually in Billy Starr as well. Only in that film, it was his voice was pitched higher than it is here on the studio album version, and I really like this song as well, or at least this part of the song. It's very, if you know Waste and Summer from the previous two albums, it kind of follows in a similar vein as those. And then when the rap part comes in later on, it's definitely interesting. It's a unique change-up, and it's cool. Like I said, the fact that I don't know what greater significance it has kind of makes it difficult to digest completely, but it's cool. I'll give it that. And to go back to the Roberto skits, which I kind of mentioned before, the cinema tracks here on the album, once again, I'm not going to go into too much analysis of them because we don't have the Saturation movie or the complete story yet, so it's kind of difficult to piece everything together. But once again, occasionally on this album, 3 times we have Roberto kind of giving us some sort of monologue in Spanish, which you can find the translations online. And, it definitely will play into the Saturation story, I feel. Once again, on the second one of these tracks, he mentions Summer by name. He says, "I'm sorry." So that definitely has some sort of greater significance to it. How exactly, I'm not 100% sure yet, but it's definitely cool. Another thing about this album that I really liked, and something that I think was kind of funny, was how on the track Rental, we have Matt Champion doing some vocals, some singing vocals that is. Now, in my review for All American Trash, the mixtape that I kind of brought up before, that I actually reviewed a couple weeks ago here on my channel, just kind of to get hyped up for this review. I mentioned how, he did a lot of singing on that mixtape, and I liked that, but then on the first 2 Saturation albums, he didn't do a lot of singing, really, and I was kind of hoping that maybe he'd do some more singing on Saturation 3, and it happened. It happened on Saturation 3. I can't believe that I got that right. That stuff rarely happens to me, so, I gotta take this victory where I can, and it's just great here on this track with his singing. Kevin's part is fantastic as well. It's just a very smooth track. And it works kind of as a track that appears towards the end of the project as well. It's a song that I really like. For Matt's vocals, especially because I do really like those. But everyone else on the track is doing a great job as well. Kevin's hook is incredibly catchy. The beat is great, especially during the outro. It's a great song. So overall, if you can't already tell, Saturation 3 is an album that I greatly enjoy. I think it's a great conclusion to the Saturation trilogy in terms of, the albums go. And I actually listened to this trilogy as a whole, like as one big continuous piece of music the other day. And it definitely is an interesting experience. It definitely does conclude the trilogy very nicely. I can't wait to see how this trilogy plays out in movie format when that film is released. I think it's definitely going to be interesting once we have the entire story and once we understand really what's going on here, because right now I feel like we have a lot of different parts, but we don't exactly understand how they all connect and tie into each other. But Saturation 3 as a whole, great album. If you like the first 2 Saturation albums, you're going to like this one. It's almost guaranteed, especially given that this one changes things up a bit more. So maybe if Saturation 2 didn't change up quite enough for you, this one, might be a bit more up your alley, I guess you could say, because it is a bit different compared to the first two Saturation albums. But it does definitely have a lot of aspects in it that were present on those first two projects that, if you enjoyed, you'll like them again here. But if you didn't enjoy them before, this album isn't exactly going to change your mind. So overall, I have to say I highly recommend this album as well as the rest of the Saturation trilogy. Once again, the playlist is linked in the description with my reviews of those projects, as well as All American Trash and some other singles. And just a little quick apology, I did, in my track review for the song Follow, I did mention that was supposed to be the first single for this album, which was untrue. That was just an unreleased demo that they were, I guess, joking about in the opening skit of that music video. So I apologize for that. If you want to check out that video, I do make that slight error in there, but I apologize. That was just me not knowing that it wasn't going to be on Saturation 3, I guess. But yeah, if you enjoyed this review, make sure you guys leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future album reviews. I actually plan on doing a video discussing the demos from Saturation once my box set arrives and I could actually, listen to the demos. I actually plan on doing a couple other just new album reviews before that, just because, those are new albums and stuff. I want to get those out of the way first. But there will be a discussion about those unreleased demo tracks in the next couple of weeks here on my channel. So make sure you subscribe if you want to hear my thoughts on those, as well as if you want to see my year-end list. Like I said, my best of albums of the year list. Guarantee that all three Saturation albums are going to be on there somewhere, and you'll finally get to figure out which ones I like the most. It's going to be a very painful process deciding, but I'm going to have to do it sometime. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.